You are listening to Essence, a podcast about story, journey, and self. Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 7 of Essence, a podcast about journey, story, and self. I am, of course, Ben Stimpson of Paduka Wellness, and Essence is a podcast all about life journeys and lessons gained along the way. And on today's show, I am very, very honored to have sat down with somebody who has a very interesting life story indeed, and somebody who's been part of my journey, although at a distance, for many years now. And that is Damh the Bard, or Dave Smith as he's known in his Muggle life. Dave is a musical artist. He is the Pendragon of the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, and Dave talks a little bit about what that means to him in the interview. He is the host of Druidcast, which is has been going on for 14 years now. It's a once-a-month Druid podcast that is put out for the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, and he is also just a generally cool individual. He's intersected with various people in my own personal life in various ways, and I was very honored to actually be able to sit down and speak to him. Dave talks with me today not about what he does, but about how he got there. I was very, very curious after having heard him and his voice in Druidcast and through the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids for years now. I was very curious to hear the behind-the-scenes story. I wanted to know from Dave how he got to where he is now, and specifically how his music has changed over these years, how his role in the Druid Order has changed over these years, and also how his music has evolved to intersect with his spirituality. We talk about his storytelling, and particularly we talk about a series of projects that he's put together over the past few years, which is an homage and his kind of version of the Welsh national epics, basically, the Imaginagya, and kind of what that process has been like for him, bridging together various parts of his personality and his life to birth these beautiful CDs, and we talk more about them in the interview. I had an amazing time sitting down with Dave. He is a very, very busy man, as you can imagine, and so I was gleeful when he accepted the invitation to come onto the podcast. And so many pieces of what he talked about I could deeply resonate with and saw in my own life, and so it was really, really cool to be able to sit down with somebody who I've held in such esteem for so many years, and to really recognize parts of my own life and my own story in the story of his life and what he was saying. That was really cool. I hope that you enjoy the interview. As always, down below you can find out more information about our guest, and I highly recommend you looking up Dave's work either through his website or on YouTube, or buying the physical CD, which is well worth it. And without further ado, let's get into the interview. Hello, everybody. I am so stoked to have somebody I really look up to on the show today, the ever wonderful Dave Smith. Dave, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's lovely to meet you. Yeah,
it's lovely to meet you.
Thanks for inviting me.
All these years, yeah. Dave is a musical artist. He is an occult practitioner, a spiritual practitioner connected with the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids. He is a musician with multiple CDs and multiple albums out. If you're in the pagan community, you probably know him from his gigs and his podcast, Druidcast. And if you're outside of that, I hope that you will start looking into his work and enjoy it as much as I do. So, Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Dave, I guess the first question I should ask is, you're a musical artist. tell us a little bit about how you started in that. Introduce us to your work through that.
Well, I said I can never tell you a short story. So music was always my first love. I was a bit of a weird kid. I am an only child. I didn't seem to get the operating manual of how to be a young boy at school, and I had no interest whatsoever in sport or football. So whereas all of my friends were swapping football cards and things like that and playing football, my love was music. I was listening to, Status Quo, I'll go take it back a few years now, but my love was music, and I loved the Sweet and Slade and T-Rex and all those glam bands when I was a kid. And I was hassling my mum and dad to buy me, I wanted to learn how to play the bass because I was also a huge fan of Elvis, and I loved that ding, 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 that kind of bass line. And I just wanted to sit down for hours just going like that on a bass guitar. And my dad said to me, and he didn't understand music, he's not a musician, but he said, don't learn how to play the bass, he said, because for a bass you need a band. You can't just sit and play bass. He said, learn how to play the 6-string guitar, something you can sing to. And if you do that, you'll never be without friends and you'll never be without an income. And I was eight at this time, right? And I still remember that bit of fatherly advice. So I learned how to play the guitar. My guitar teacher was an Irishman called Tim O'Leary. He could not read music.
Right.
I was his first guitar student at 8 years old, and he couldn't read music. So he taught me how to play by ear. He basically sat down in front of me. He said, right, this is and he wrote every chord shape out by hand in my book. David, have you got your book? Have you brought your book? So and he would teach me how to play. Yeah. So he'd play a G chord, for instance. He said, shut your eyes, listen. Now I play a D chord. Is that higher in pitch or lower than pitch? And he tuned my ear, and I still can't read music to this day, but I think that's why I can hear music and in everything, because of the way that Tim taught me. Years later, he learned how to read music, and he became he taught in a different way. But I think I was just lucky to be in the right place at the right time, being taught by an Irish multi-instrumentalist. Yes. I remember when he built his own Celtic harp, and it had a carved dragon's head, and he could play the fiddle, he could play anything, but he couldn't read music. And I thought that's amazing,
Well, and it's interesting, and I want to make a point on that. He comes out, my understanding is he comes out of the Irish folk tradition. Yes. Which is very much sitting in pubs, learning together. It isn't about reading from scripts, right?
Exactly. It's about jamming. It's about jamming and being with your mates, drinking your Guinness and playing your music in the pub in Dublin. It's like that's what it's all about. It's about that kind of thing, and it's about having a mandolin next to you that anybody in the pub could come in, pick up the mandolin, and just join in to the and what is interesting is because I started out with a love of rock, and I got into heavy metal and as a teenager, and that kind of thing. But I was taught Irish folk, and my mum and dad, although they loved the Stones, they also loved Johnny Cash. They loved John Denver. They like Emmylou Harris. All those American folk singers as well. And I was weaned on that stuff. And what happened was I was taught how to play the guitar, but I couldn't play heavy rock for save my life. But I could drum. I had a natural rhythm. I didn't have any training, but I could play the drums. So throughout my teens and 20s, I was a drummer in a heavy metal band called Targa. If you go on the internet, you might just about find some stuff from us. And that's where I was. I was a heavy metal drummer. And at the same time, I was into the occult. I mean, what most heavy metal people in some way are into magic, I think, as well. There's that kind of, Ozzy Osbourne taught me how to do magic. Do you know what I mean?
Right,
And all those people, old Tipper Gore and all those people that said, heavy metal will lead you to the occult. Well, it probably will.
Probably
It certainly did. It certainly did with me, and Dungeons and Dragons and everything that goes with it, and so I played heavy metal drummers. I was a drummer in a heavy metal band, but at the same time I was into the occult. And then finally I kind of found my way into Druidry. And I went to my first Obod camp in 1995 for the summer solstice. And so many things happened that week. I'm sure we're going to go back to that camp. But the moment that changed things for me as well was music. I'd learnt about the bardic tradition, and I'd been getting the Obod Gwers through, but I hadn't really been giving them my proper attention, And then I came to this camp and I saw a bard called Andy Letcher, who is the lead singer of a band called Telling the Bees. And he played mandolin, he played bagpipes, he told stories. And I thought, I want to be like you. He was my role model. And then I was sitting by a campfire on one of the nights, and this figure came over with holding this instrument. She said, could I play my harp by your campfire? And I just went, oh yeah. She sat down, she started playing the Celtic harp by the campfire. I had a campfire, I had storytellers, I had poets, I was under a moon and starlit sky, and a harper was playing by my campfire. I just thought, that's it, I'm done. I am done here. This is just the absolute business. And she said, if any of you want to learn how to play the harp, come and see me tomorrow. So I was there like at sunrise outside her tent. She unzipped her tent and there I was. And I just started to learn how to play the harp. Now on the guitar, the high notes are on the little fingers. On the harp, the high notes are on the thumb. And I didn't know if I could get my head around that. But I just picked up this instrument. I found I could get a tune out of it. And her name is Ziggy. And she just went, Dave, you've got to get a harp. So when I got back home, I left the band. I sold my drum kit. Wow. And I bought a Celtic harp, which is still sitting down in my room right now. So it was, and what happened was I came full circle. I started with folk music,
right,
and now I am earning my living through pagan folk music. And so that's why it was a long story. That was the root of it. Was way back then with Tim, and it started to really come to its fruition. In 1995, when I went to my first pagan camps, and met Ziggy, and that's how it came about. Really, the music, as you know it now, that's its root.
There's a real relationship in your life too, because my understanding is you, when you say you started out in the occult, it was ceremonial magic, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes. And during that time of heavy metal and drumming, and then mellowing, and well, I wouldn't even say mellowing, that transition to going back to those folk roots and more naturalistic.
The ceremonial magic was wonderful because it was what I was looking for at the time, and it answered a call, and it was like me putting my toe in, but not getting fully committed. It was like, but I think everyone has to find their own path, and my path was not Christianity. I wanted something that was far more earth-based, and actually, ceremonial magic is quite airy. It's quite up there in the clouds with the Kabbalah and all of this stuff, and I found myself thinking, that I need to bring it down to earth. I need to get into the mud, and the stories of the land that I'm walking on, and that's what that's the point where I thought I need to start exploring Wicca, witchcraft and druidry and heathenism and that kind of thing, and seeing which one of those kind of fit well with me. But and of course, the music of the bard can be anything, of course, but what I wanted was to write music that could be played around campfires. One of the things that was a driving force to me was to write songs that could be played around campfires with just one acoustic instrument. And that's it. So no amplification, nothing like that, just literally a mandolin, guitar, harp, and a voice. And that to me is what the bard is in my heart.
Yes.
You know.
Yes. I had a storyteller, one of my mentors in storytelling, come on a month or so ago, and he was speaking much the same way. When you have all of this stuff, when you have all of the amplifications, and they do fit, right? It really affects the relationship between you and the group listening, right?
Yeah. I mean, there came a point in my musical career where I had to go through amplifiers. There was I resisted it for ages. I would play a marquee and play acoustically, and I'd come away and my voice was absolutely rotten because I've been singing so loud all night. And in the end, I just thought I need to now. My audience is big.
Yes.
And I now need to go through an amplifier, but it's still just me and a guitar and a voice and a stomp box. I do like the old stomp box to get the old rhythm going. But yeah. So that is now part of my musical career. But the songs still work stripped down. That's the thing. I think even though I'm multi-track, the song has to work with just one instrument and a voice.
Yes.
And if it doesn't work with one instrument and a voice, then it needs to be honed a little longer,
a little bit longer.
Right? Yeah.
I almost I would assume that there's, when it's stripped down, when it's just you with the audience and nothing else, just you and your instrument and your voice, it becomes very intimate. It's a very intimate process, right?
Oh, and spontaneous.
Yes.
I was in bands, and it's harder to be spontaneous when there's three other people who are affected by your spontaneity. Whereas when I perform now, it's like, if I want to stop in the middle of a song and just talk to an audience, I'll do that. I'll just kind of like absolutely go with the flow of the night. And even down to the point of seeing maybe a young child dancing to my music and just saying, hold on a minute. Do you want to see something special? Get her on the stage. Go on. And so she'll come and dance on the stage with me, with people and stuff like that. That kind of interaction is what I love about, being a totally solo musician. You can do that kind of thing. Otherwise the rest of the band will be going, what's he doing now? Oh my God.
We've got time. We want to get to bed.
Yeah.
The party.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I love what you said about flow there, because that word has really been a resonance for the past 25 years of your life, ever since you joined OBOD. That flow of Arwen, that flow of inspiration. I want to ask you, so you joined in 1995, and then 15 years later, you became the Pendragon of the community. Can you talk a little bit about first of all, what is the Pendragon for our audience who may not know? What was it like for you to step into that place?
Yeah. Well, again, I'll give you a little bit of background first. The Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids was originally founded in the 60s by Ross Nichols, Nguyen. And his Pendragon was Vera Chapman, author, and she was the founder of the Tolkien Society. Yeah. So Nguyen's Pendragon was Vera Chapman. Philip refounded the order in 1988, and his Pendragon was the artist Will Worthington, who did the artwork for the Druidcraft Tarot, Druid Animal Oracle, fantastic artist. And he was the Pendragon for 19 years, which is a full Metonic cycle. But in the end, he felt like it was time to hand it over to somebody else. And Philip asked me if I would take on that role. And at the time, I confess, I found it as a huge compliment, because it is one of the three of the triad of the order. There's the chosen chief, the Pendragon, and the scribe. And although there's no kind of bumps in the order, at the end of the day, someone has to make the decision, and so because there's three, it can never be stalemate in decision making. Something will always happen with three. Right. And and me, Philip, and Steph became the Pendragon, the triad for many years. And but at the time, other than being part of that decision-making triad, I didn't really know spiritually what it meant, because it appeared to mean different things to each Pendragon. But what it did say is, like, you had a writer, you had an artist, and now you've got a musician. So it does seem that the Pendragon role came from kind of like an artistic background. So I was initiated as Pendragon in 2010. And I would say it took me a year to fully understand what that role was. And for me, as Pendragon. And it seems like you have the scribe is the engine room. Steph, she basically ran the office. She made sure the worst got out on time. She was like the engine room. Then you have the chosen chief. Well, the buck stops here. He's like, you know, that's it. You know, if you make a decision, it's a bad one, he gets it in the net, kind of thing, you know. And the Pendragon became ambassador. I guess that's what you would call it. So I see myself very much as having one foot within the order and one foot outside of it, like a bridging gap of information and a contact, so that if people are interested in Druidry, a lot of the time when they email OBOD, it will come to my email. And I am the person who will tell them about it. Druidcast is another perfect example. I remember in 2007, I went to Philip. I said, Philip, we are great at looking after our members, but we're a bit rubbish about reaching out to non-members and telling people what we do. There's this new thing that started called podcasting. I think we should do one. And Philip just said, oh, go on, Dave, do what you like. You know, it sounds great, kind of thing. And so we started Druidcast and it's totally free, you know, every month since 2007, around about the 20th of the month, without fail, we've had an episode out. And I like that consistency as well. That's something that is always good for me in OBOD, is there is a consistency in OBOD. When we say we're going to do something, unless something cataclysmic like a pandemic happens,
and even then, there's ways.
We usually deliver what we say we're going to do. So that podcast became another expression of being the Pendragon to me as well.
And
of course my music, you know, my music as well is a kind of like, you know, it's part obviously to do with OBOD, but it's also slightly separate in as much as, you know, people listen to it, they hear the, you know, the stories of the horned god or whatever in the songs, and they go, what's that? Or they might move something in them, and then they start to explore more. So yeah, so it's ambassador is about the closest I would come to as a description of the Pendragon role for me. Yeah.
Have you found that your approach to being that ambassador has changed in the past 14 years?
Yes. I think you know, with anything, as time passes, you become more confident, you know, and you know, for a while, I would say, like anybody placed in that position, I had a huge amount of imposter syndrome feelings, you know, kind of like, oh, at any moment they're going to find out I can't read music, or I can't tell a story, or I'm not very good, or I don't know my Druidry, blah, blah, blah. And of course, all of that is just up here, isn't it? It's all in your head. But I had it, you know, like anybody else, put into that role. Do I deserve to be doing this for the largest Druid order in the world, and all those things that go on through your head? Not so much now. I kind of like, I'm very happy in my own skin. You know, I don't think I could live and walk and talk Druidry any more than I do in my life. So if people have problems with that, then it really doesn't, it's not my problem now, you know.
Totally their problem, yes.
Yeah. So I think over the years, I've become a lot more confident in myself with the role. It changed as well, because obviously Philip stepped down as the chosen chief last year, and Irma was inducted as the chosen chief. So now I have a different member of the triad to work with, and you know, she went through a good 2-year apprenticeship with Philip. So you know, that all one of the things that can destroy groups is changing of leadership. You know, I mean, and Philip could see that, and he's, you know, with everybody else, we've built this up to something that is truly beautiful. And the last thing we want is some kind of ego power struggle at the top.
That's
you know, because it's not about who you know. I'm Pendragon, but that's not important. Pendragon just means, as far as I'm concerned, I am in service to the membership. That's it. I'm not some big I am. I'm just in service to the membership. And the same attitude has to be held by the scribe and the chief. It's a position of service, not of authority. And and you know, so that's changed, and working with Irma is now, you know, very different, but just as interesting and just as exciting. So yeah.
That is one aspect of OBOD that I absolutely love, is that kind of centralized, decentralized form of authority. It is, I mean, even down to the fact that mentors are not in the same geographic location that you're in. Anything like, well, with Druidcast, you inviting so many people from outside the order to come and speak on the show. And even what Philip Cargama has said multiple times, that idea that, you know, we're not looking at schisms. We don't see people breaking off as schisms. It's, you know, going and finding their own path. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's happened many times, and on the whole, everyone has stayed very friendly and supportive of each other as well. You know, it's how things should grow and change. You know,
grow and change.
Yeah.
And I mean, that word, right? That word "grow" is so central to Druidry. A lot of the, I mean, obviously, I won't talk about the rest of the course here, but that piece about growing. Kind of very much relates to even your own, well, very much your own journey. There was I really wanted to ask you about this, because I thought when I listened to it, when Wardruna came and reached out to you, and you could tell in your voice on the podcast, and this was just a few months ago, like you're like, oh, they wanted to speak to me. What was that like for you?
It's, you know, it's natural to get starstruck, isn't it? When you have a great respect for somebody, and suddenly they're sitting there talking to you as if you're just somebody they've known for years. And you know, the way that happened was that Einar heard the Walking the Talk series, and he wanted to invite me over to Norway and walk with him and be taken to those things, but we couldn't because of the pandemic. So we did this Zoom interview, and you know, it was, it is. It's a huge respect of what they do as a band, what Einar does specifically, I think, as well. I mean, I know they are a band, but I also always get the impression that Einar is the driving force behind Wardruna, and the interview I had with him was just like talking to myself.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, all the things that he was saying he does, I do when I seek inspiration for my music, and it was just like looking into a mirror and just hearing the words that I probably would say if I was asked those same questions came back to me. And it was a lovely interview, but I was a little bit kind of like, I can't believe, you know, these people want to talk to little old me, you know. Yeah. But I kind of like that. I fight. I don't fight, but I never want to be self-important. You know, I want to be part of it. I don't want to be in charge of anything particularly. I want to be just part of the movement, you know. And so I do kind of push back any sense of grandeur that starts to appear in my own head.
and the universe tends to do that too. As soon
it
as
does.
There, it's like, nope.
Yeah.
So speaking about your inspirations, then, kind of bringing it back to that concept of Arwen, you said Einar has some very similar ways of seeking inspiration. What are some of your inspirations? Where do you derive that sustenance from?
Oh, I think that the Arwen is an elusive mistress. You know, Nuivre life force is always there, but Arwen is something like, you know, even down to the story of the creation of Arwen, the tale of Ceridwen and Taliesin. It's an elusive mistress. It's Keith Richards, I think, of the Rolling Stones, says writing a song is like fishing. You just cast your hook into the stream of consciousness, and every now and again you're lucky enough to catch one. But I think for anyone who is creative, they're just sitting and waiting for it to happen. If you do that, it might never happen. So you have to place yourself in the stream of inspiration. You have to get in the way of inspiration. And the way I get in the way of inspiration is to head off to Dartmoor, to an old sacred site, to Wayland Smithy, the Downs, even the local beach, to just sit there and just listen to the sea waves, to hear the gulls, to really enter into a relationship with the natural world. And if you do that on a regular basis, something will come up and you go, that sounds like a song. And that will then lead you to write the song. And I also am a huge, and always have been, a massive fan of mythology. And when I was at school, if you'd have believed the history teachers at school, then our history started with the Romans.
Right.
Yeah. What I've realized since school is that the history of this island, of everywhere else, started way before then, with the stone circle builders, with the people who built the long barrows, with the first farmers, with the hunter-gatherers, with the artists who drew that piece of art in the caves of France of the shaman figure with antlers. And that was when my little bardic imagination went wild, because that was when the spirits of the land all around started to become real, and not just figments of storytellers and fairy tale, but actually real energies, real powers that I can develop a relationship with and sing about and bring into and of course by singing them and putting them into songs, you're bringing them to new ears who have never heard of the words of Cernunnos or Pan or Herne or Blodeuwedd or Llay or Gwydion or Merlin or Arthur. That's where my creative mind lives, in that, in reality and in imagination, and right there in the middle is where the Awen lives to me, where those two spheres cross over.
That's a beautiful description. I got goosebumps when you were talking about it. But the more I delve into my own spirituality and my professional life too, the more that interconnection, that other world of imagination and reality blending comes. And it's funny how so many people just accept the stories that they're given as fact. And like, we see this even in everyday life, right? How many stories are we gifted by our family and said, this is reality, this is the story that you must live by. And it's almost like a lifelong process to deconstruct those stories and find the kind of the hidden stories behind them, right?
Yeah. And myth, the word myth kind of is second rate. It's almost, people go, it's just a myth.
Yes.
But to me, myths are the second level of story. So you have the tale, and then you have the myth, and the myth is all of the hidden meanings, all of the occult meanings that are held within the story. The Mabinogi, for instance, if you took it as just a story, it's a very nice story. But the moment you start looking into the linguistics of the old Mabinogian, and you realize that Havgan's name means summer, and there's a battle between the dark of Araun and the light of summer, suddenly this myth becomes more than just a story. And another thing, a beautiful saying that I heard once said, no myth ever happened, but every myth is true.
Yes.
And I love that, and it's the true with a capital T. It's the truths that they hold, that really turn me on.
I feel that on a deep level. It's that kind of, It's that Western rationalistic Protestant kind of thing of, things either have to be one or the other, true or false. There's those false dichotomies when something can be true and false at the same time. And even that word false is, and what I loved what you just said about connecting with the land, going into the land and looking at the land and seeing that. We know as storytellers, folklore is always embedded in the land. You walk into a region and the stories are always embedded in those places, because then people can enter into that story. It's not like they're just casual observers on the outside.
Absolutely.
Any moment you can turn around the corner and come across one of those figures, and you become part of that story.
Absolutely. Yeah. And myths change as well with telling, don't they? They change over the course of time. And although I love the fact that the Mabinogi was written down, because if it wasn't written down, we could well have lost those stories. By writing them down, you also trap them kind of on page. And it's a bit like folk songs, folk songs are living, breathing traditional songs, but and they were dying out. So people like Francis Child and the Copper family headed out into the countryside and they wrote down the folk songs. But when they wrote down Raggle Taggle Gypsies, they went to that village and wrote down Jack's version of Raggle Taggle Gypsy. Over in that village, there was a John who did a different version of the Raggle Taggle Gypsies, but that one didn't get written down. And what kind of makes me kind of shrug and go, oh, like that, is when people argue about authenticity when it comes to mythology and folk song, because they're only authentic because that's the bit of paper that they were written down on. They trapped them at that moment. And then from that moment, they almost, if they're not careful, they're going to stop them from breathing and progressing, and those things are all about the folk. They're all about the folk, and so they need to be able to express for new generations to come and make it their own.
Absolutely, to make it relevant. Well, a very good example of that is our mutual friend Chris Hughes up in Anglesey, and his work with Mari Louise. A few weeks ago, he was geeking out on his Facebook page about having that book written by that Methodist minister, who tried to destroy and say how Mari Louise Festival was so evil in this. So what did he do? Write down every single detail in.
And kept it alive.
But then you see with that example, Mari Louise, all of the different variations around Wales and England of how that tradition has been taken for ownership by those different groups. You go to Chepstow and you ask them who is the Mari Louise, and they'll have different answers, right?
Yeah.
That's that flow that you were talking about.
Absolutely. The flow of Owen still happening.
So let's talk about the Imaginagya, because for the past, since 2017, that's become a large part of your work. And you just debuted the third branch last year, right?
That's right, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that project and what it meant to you.
So the Mabinogi is the title. And they come from, my first encounter with them was when I was a sales rep. And I was on the road and I was visiting, I had shorter hair, I was visiting customers, and I stopped off and I bought a copy of the Mabinogian. This one was a Geoffrey Gant's Penguin version, but the original kind of translation was by Lady Charlotte Guest back in the 1800s. And I was new to the Druid path, but I'd heard about these stories, so I started to read them, and I thought I like them, but there's something missing, and I don't know what it is. There's something missing, and but it wouldn't go away. I fell in love with some of the characters from these mythologies, like Blodeuwedd and those stories and Arawn and all these characters within them, but I couldn't quite connect totally because they were held in very Christian language. They've been written down by Christian monks, and I couldn't understand the nuance because I wasn't Welsh. But I held them within me. I wrote a few songs. I wrote Oak Broom Meadow Sweet. I wrote Bloodaweth, Cloak of Feathers, you know, very Lady of the Silver Wheel about Ariane Rod. They're all about these gods and goddesses from the Mabinogi. But what I realized is that I wanted to create a Mabinogi for us. You know, I was talking about having it trapped in amber. It felt like the translations had trapped them in that form. Yes. And there was so much more magic that just couldn't get out because they had to be translations. And they are translations of the White Book of Rither and the Red Book of Hergest that were back from the 1300s, written down, as I say, by Christian monks at the time. And these things you have on the thing of translations. Now, since over the last sort of 10 years, people have really gone into the linguistics of the Mabinogi. And those linguistics have opened up all new doors that cannot be put into translations because they're translations. So I thought, I also thought these are meant to be heard. They're not meant to be read. They're meant to be heard. They're meant to be, you know, the idea is that the bard came to your village, sat down and told these tales. And people were enthralled by them as they told these tales. They didn't read them on a page passively. They were included and involved in them. And so I thought, well, I'm going to try this. I'm going to have a go at this. And I'm going to absolutely stay faithful to the translations and include everything from the translations, but I'm also going to include everything from the current research. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in the translations, it says, for instance, Puig in the guise of Araun meets Havgan in battle. Yeah. And they have a fight, and that's it. But of course, we know that Havgan means summer. And Araun is a dark grey hunter. Yes. I mean, straight from the wild hunt of Samhain, of winter, you know. So you have a seasonal battle there. But you can't say that in a translation. So in my version, I say, you know, Havgan stepped forward and Puig saw that the sun shone from his eyes as if he held within him the very heart of summer itself. So I'm not kind of leading people's hands, but I am putting all of that in there now. And it's mixed. And I get to a point where I think this bit is far better described in song. So for this part, I'll write a song. So they average about 5 or 6 songs per double album. And the rest of it is the story, completely up to date, completely including all of the current research, and putting them through a re-paganizer, I guess. You know, because these gods and goddesses, without a doubt, do come from pre-Christian times, and so they need to be told with that love of a pre-Christian bard, in my opinion. And so that's it really, and it has been an amazing journey. It's been, I'll be honest, it's utterly selfish. I'm doing this totally for me. You know, I'm happy that other people are enjoying it, but I think even if nobody bought it, I would be doing this. Because it's like, to me, it's like, this is what it's all been about to me. Yeah. You know, and I've got one more branch to go, and then I have the whole 4 branches of the Mabinogi.
Very much looking forward to it. Very much.
Two CD sets and stuff, and I hope that people are hearing them for the first time and falling in love with them like I did. You know, but yeah.
It's so it was actually Tiffany, my supervisor, gave them to me because she knew that I would love them, and I hadn't heard them yet. And of course, being from Wales, it's interesting. We're not really told about the Imaginagya, especially when I left Wales. Like, there was no mention of it when I was a kid. But now there's been a real research of really reclaiming those stories and putting them out there. But it's like you said, it is very different when you read it. It's like Shakespeare. Shakespeare is not meant to be read. No. And it's the torture of high school to have to read it.
Absolutely.
But to be experienced, and that's really that stepping into the story. And I think what you've accomplished And I want my readers, I'm going to put the link, if that's okay, down in the show notes to order it, because it is such an experiential thing to step into that story. And that mix of prose and poetry is very natural, I find. But you could tell that the amount of detail and love put into it. Was it difficult to, when you produced it and you had it ready to go, was there a moment of hesitation of putting it out there?
Oh, with the first one, definitely. So different. I mean, I'd been releasing pagan albums with 10 to 12 pagan songs, each one lasting about 6 minutes, you know, for 17 years, you know, and then suddenly I do that. You know, I record an audiobook with songs, and I just thought, I don't know how this is going to go, but I it's too important to me. You know, if I get, when I get the fourth branch done, you know, if for whatever reason I'm told I'm not going to last long or whatever, in my heart I know I've left something of value.
Yes.
You know, that's why I'm doing those albums, you know, because they are another part of the story of the Mabinogi, you know, and the development of the Mabinogi.
Yes.
So I put all my heart and soul in them, and I was so happy when people got it. There were a few people who wrote and said, when you're going to record another song album? And I kept saying, oh, next time. You know, it's not worked out that way. It's been a constant journey, you know. It's like, I said that to, I said, I've got a friend, a bardic friend out in the States. And I released the second branch. And I said, right, I'm going to have a break now and do an album of songs. And he just looked at me and he said, what if the lady doesn't want that? And I said, well, if that's not what the lady wants, she'll get what she wants. And she didn't want that. I sat down to write songs and there was nothing, no inspiration whatsoever. And I thought, well, I've got to get on with the third branch then, you know. And at the end of the third branch, I said, now I'm going to do an album of songs. And then the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, it's hard to put yourself in the way of inspiration when you can't leave your house. You know, yeah, so it's been a bit dry, you know, and the fourth branch is calling me again. So I think I'm just going to get on with it and just go for it. And, you know, and that's it. Yeah.
That's beautiful. So then the next question is, when you've reached the end of the fourth branch, what's next? What's after that?
Well, I'm going to try and write an album of songs and do the fourth branch at the same time. I'm just going to write songs. I'm not going to kind of dice it up. I'm just going to do it both at the same time. So I still want to do another album of songs. I have thoroughly enjoyed the Mabinogi, and I don't see that kind of output going away, because there's still plenty of mythology to get your teeth into in that format of storytelling with orchestral. You know, I did an online course with Hans Zimmer, the guy who does the scores, movie scores for like Batman and all these things. I did an online course with him, and because I knew that a lot of this would be film scoring, because it needed that kind of dramatic music as well to really bring to life those moments. And hey, you know, there's still plenty to do. I mean, I've toyed with the idea of L'Amour d'Arthur, you know, do it, because that's the best representation of that book has been Excalibur, the film.
Yes.
But maybe it could be made something in a different way into this audio version as well. There's Beowulf, you know, there's so many amazing mythologies. There's the actual story of Ceridwen and Taliesin, for instance. It goes on further than when he's just discovered and named. You know, they go on further journeys as well, you know. So I think now I've done once I've done the fourth branch, I don't see that's the end of the story mythology music kind of mashup stopping. I think it will carry on as well.
I hope not. I really hope that it continues. And
Yeah.
especially, something you just said reminded me of what you talked about before about going into the land and having access to the land. The story I found the stories, especially being from the UK, the stories hit differently when you can go to the place and stand there and be in that spot, like going up to Lake Bala, like Llyn Tegid in North Wales, and imagining, okay, this is the space that Cerridwen
Yes.
and Taliesin worked.
Yes.
Having access to those spaces. I think it'll hit differently with your work. And there are so many stories, regional stories, small stories, small stories that are huge, that can be worked on. So I look forward to that. I really do look forward to it. Yeah.
Well, sorry, my dog is
It's okay.
being a dog.
Well, final question then. Sorry, go on. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was going to say that when I uploaded the first branch, I use a group called CD Baby, and they aggregate my stuff to iTunes and Spotify and that. But they always send you their version of your album to listen through to make sure there's no dropouts or anything like that. And I got that email when I was in Wales, and so I listened to the final version of the first branch sitting on the banks of Lake Bala, and it was just, there were moments when I was in tears because the land knows those tales. I may be English through birth, but I have such a connection to Britain as an island.
Yes.
That and these are part of Britain as an island, as well as part of being that part of the island. And it was like the land, as I didn't put it through headphones, I listened to it out loud, and it was like the lake and the shore just went, I know these stories. This is a little different. I've heard them before, but I know them. And it was beautiful, absolutely incredible. Yeah,
that's amazing. It's something I resonate with. I mean, that's a whole other conversation, but the land does know the stories. It does hear. It does hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, final question for you. Thinking about all what we've talked about today, what are some of the major lessons that you've learned in your life?
So the major lessons I've learned in my life.
What have you learned about?
Wow. I try to hold on to things very gently. I think that's one of the lessons I've learned in my life. It's like, I don't hold on tightly to ideas. I don't hold on tightly to things. I try to be grateful every day for being alive and waking up and having another day. And I think that's one thing. That's one thing I learned in life, is to hold on gently. The tighter people hold on, it's what's the way? It's that kind of like the oak falls over but the reed bends, or whatever it's called. I can't remember the exact quote. Be the reed kind of thing. That's something that I have learned. And that also goes into my spirituality. I have things that are very important to me personally, with my pagan past, with my druidry, my relationship to the land and my gods and all those things. But I also recognize that that is my personal relationship to these things. And I think, we organize open rituals, we organize camps for people. And when you organize open rituals, you can't bring your entire rucksack of beliefs. You have to bring what is in the rucksack that you think has common ground with the other people in the circle. And then you can all fill in the gaps yourself, but you don't bestow or you don't enforce your view of the world onto the other people in that circle. You work from the area of common ground, the love of the land, the love of nature, the love of life, the love of history, and things like that. Things that everyone in that circle pretty much are going to agree with. And then that's where you express your community druidry from. When I'm on my own, it's very different. You know, I have my own ways of doing things, but when it's out there, so that's also part of holding on gently, is knowing that, you know, okay, although I feel this about how things are, that doesn't make it right for everybody else. So just, you know, just hold on gently and just facilitate growth, you know, and experience, you know, once you're in that kind of wider community. Yeah. And the other thing, never read your reviews.
That is a common lesson a lot of artists need to learn.
Yeah, no, seriously, never read your reviews. There's a temptation, and I do find myself doing it, going, oh, there's 5 stars, there's 5 stars. Then you'll get to the 1 star.
Yeah.
And that's the only one that you'll think about for the rest of the day, you know. So just express your music, express your art, and then move on. Yeah. And you know, don't get caught up in the reviews.
That's wise in every person's life. That is that's a lesson I'm trying to learn.
I think that's part of the reason why Facebook has such a problem, because every day people put up a point of view.
Yes.
And the comments are essentially reviews of that point of view. Exactly. And no wonder people are have fatigue through social media, because you're constantly getting critiqued by people. Yeah. I don't do that. I try not to post anything, or you know, I try to just post this is it and then move on to the next thing. You know? Yeah, it's a struggle. Yeah,
it's true. And it's funny, that's like spreading out to, you know, all aspects of life. You go into Asda or Sainsbury's and you look at the reviews of certain products and it's vitriol.
Yeah.
Well, Damh the Bard, thank you so much for joining me. First of all, thank you for accepting my request to come onto the podcast. I was really stoked to have you on, and I've loved this conversation. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. It's a very different experience to normal. So I'm very happy you invited me. So thanks a lot, Ben. It's really nice. Thank you.
If people want to learn more about your music specifically, I'll put the links for the podcast, absolutely. But your links, your work specifically, where can they find that?
The hub of all things Damh the Bard is my website, paganmusic.co.uk. Perfect. And if they go to paganmusic.co.uk, they'll find all the links to social media. They'll find links to Spotify, if that's your avenue, Apple Music, my blog, the podcast, my spirituality. It's all there on the website.
Beautiful. I will put those down in the show notes down below, and I do highly recommend you connect with Damh and look at his work. And the Mabinogi is on YouTube right now too. So if people want,
it's on YouTube, it's on Spotify, it's on all of the streaming services. And if you want to hold the hard copy with all of Kerry's lovely artwork, you can order that from my website too. Yeah, what I'm looking forward to on that, once the 4th one comes out, my aim is to produce a little lovely box where all 4 can slip inside, and it just says the 4 branches down the outside. Yeah,
that's beautiful.
One day.
I'm looking forward to that.
Cool.
Damh, thank you again.
Thank you.
And I'm just gonna